and welcome everyone in our audience. With us today, we have Minnesota-based romance writer Frankie Page, who has been writing and dreaming up stories for as long as she can remember. For the longest time, her primary outlet for her stories was screenplay writing and theatre. Now, she enjoys writing and reading a vast variety of romance genres. Anything from small-town steamy romances to the dark and depraved. She loves it all. Hi, Frankie.
Hi.
We have Selena Michaels, who writes romance novels with adult-aged characters and lots of twists you'll never see coming. Her novels often stem from her own experiences growing up in the small town of Pennsylvania, along with other people's experiences she has met along her life journey. Hi, Selena.
Hi.
Born and raised in South Africa, Erin Mc Luckie Moya thrived on stories and the art of storytelling. A long stint in marketing saw her move across the world, settling in rural North Italy with her husband, 2 children, and a cat. She now hones her craft of storytelling in creating tales that she herself would want to read. Hi, Erin.
I think she froze partway through that.
Yeah, that's very good acting, it's not.
Okay, we'll see if hopefully she can get back to us shortly. We also have Joshua Wake, a writer and editor living in Adelaide, Australia. When not indulging his imagination with the written word or struggling with the nagging feeling that he might not actually exist, Joshua likes to immerse himself in stories through the medium of video games. This informs and inspires his own writing, such as it is. Regardless of genre, Joshua's favourite stories are the ones that wield intrigue with expert ease, leading their reader to look to the sky for answers while sands shift beneath. Hi, Joshua.
Hello, host, fellow guests, and viewer.
And I see we've got YD in the audience. Hi, YD.
She's like, I'm posting everywhere.
Okay. And for our viewers today, we have a bit of a surprise coming up. If you stick with us until the end, we'll be giving away a pack of paperbacks from the authors here, plus an ebook from Joshua Wake, because he hasn't got a paperback yet. Now, today we are talking about dark romance. This broad genre covers anything from love stories with dark tones to erotic romance novels that enter highly taboo territory. When I say taboo, I mean themes of stalking, rape, torture, violence, sexual slavery, etc. These are the books with all the trigger warnings. As authors of dark romance, we drag our main characters through hell, sometimes literally. But why? Is it to satisfy some dark fantasies of our own and those of our readers? Or do we set out to convey deeper meanings? I can't speak for all our authors, but I can put these questions to our guest. What do you think, guys?
Well, there are a couple of reasons I would make a character suffer, but the main one I think is depth of character, to develop them properly, because you do want your characters to be empathetic and someone they can be related to, and you can't really do that with someone who hasn't suffered at all. And then I suppose the second reason is sort of voyeuristic masochism, because it is nice to see a villain get theirs at the end, that sort of thing.
For sure.
But the main reason I would have for something like that is to develop them and develop reader empathy for that character. then within that, it's important to make their suffering sort of plausible and relatable within their situation, and not so crazy that people just switch off.
Yeah. So why do you write dark romance, Frankie?
I think it's a mix of things. One, I'm a horror junkie. I've been watching horror thrillers since I was probably too extremely young to even be watching it. So my life has kind of always been in this realm of dark, and I've always related better to darker themed romances and kind of like that toxic love element. But then also too, I think I like the fact of having this ability to take things that weren't so great from my life or other people's lives and give it a twist to make it a happy ending, but not so ridiculously happy that it's unbelievable. I don't know. It's really weird, but I kind of just like the ability to show that like things can be really fucked up and it's still going to be okay. Am I allowed to swear? I might have to watch that.
She said the R word, and I was like, we can do that?
Okay. I'm like, work brain, turn off swear words. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I think it's nice to be able to see things that are just completely just this clustered mess and then still be able to have something happy out of it that's not perfect. I think that's, for me, like my favorite part about dark romances, and I love like the super twisted journey to get to that happy place at the end and having everyone be okay with all the twistedness.
Awesome. I'm glad you were able to get back into the stream, Erin. We're just talking about why we like to write dark romance.
Oh, that is a very complicated question because I think it speaks to my psyche. I think I like to write. I think I like to both read and write dark romance because I connect with flawed, not just flawed characters, but characters that are really messed up. There's obviously like some intrinsic part of me based on whatever I've gone through that connects with these kinds of characters. And I like presenting them in a way where their darkness and the stuff that they go through and the things that happen are not just brushed over and you just get a happily ever after. It's really, really nuanced and looked at and highlighted. And at the end of the novel, you don't just ignore all the crappy things that have happened or the twisted things that have happened, but you almost embrace them. And I think they can honestly, in that itself, it's healing. It could be healing. And it shows you that happiness does not come in one form. You don't just need one cookie cutter kind of personality or character to achieve a certain kind of lifestyle. I enjoy that because I find it more akin to real life than these romances that are just like small town guy meets small town girl. The biggest problem they have is like miscommunication, and at the end it's like a happily ever after. And don't get me wrong, sometimes when I'm writing my dark, fucked up shit, that is exactly what I need to read because I literally don't want to think. But for me, I'm physically, and it's not even like I haven't tried, I seem to be unable to write that kind of romance. Everything that happens, the characters make their own decisions. Any writer will tell you that. Like, I do not control these characters. They make their own decisions. And somehow I will go into it with the intention of going, this is how the story's going to go. This is going to be a contemporary. And it just never ends up that way. Never.
Yeah. Can relate. All right, Selena.
Yes, so you'd say
I was like,
to
oh
write it,
gosh.
but you can't not.
I'm like panicking because I'm the last. I should have went first. So I'm going to try not to be long-winded because I feel like I have a million different answers for this question, and it always depends. I'm the type of person that I like to look at like a party and like look around and be like, how is everybody acting? If everybody's hyped up, I'm going to be hyped up. If everybody's chill, I'm chill. So I'm going to try and like keep this really short. But there are two phrases that came to mind when I saw this interview question because I get asked a lot. One, birds of a feather flock together. And two, beauty and chaos. So when I first started writing, it was a lot like, you cannot do this. And I don't know if you guys have children. I know some of you do. When you tell a child they can't do something, what do? the exact opposite. They want to do it even more. So I kept being told, like, you can't do this, and there's all these ramifications, and this is how you have to market, and that's how dark romance is. And I was like, I just want to be free and write just crazy storylines, because I could literally be in the grocery store and see someone and be like, I bet you he's a murderer. And I'm like, that's probably not normal. But I found my people who get it. Like, I will be on the phone and I'll be talking about something unrelated. I'm at work, not paying attention. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if a stalker? And then, like, all my friends, they get it. They're like, I'm here with you, you know? But there's also the birds of the feather thing, where I find that a lot of authors who write dark romance and write traumatic storylines have had trauma happen to themselves. And that's why I won't change my bio. So a lot of people said, because of recent events, I should change my bio about how I write. And I refuse to, because I'm a very transparent person. I have told people, if you don't want something in a book, don't tell it to me. And that might sound horrible, but here's the thing. It's not controllable. Because when I write and I create a character, I don't sometimes even realize. When I wrote The Sicilians, I did not realize I was basing it off of a friend. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that I don't know when I did. I messaged her and she was so overjoyed about it. She's like, my family's going to love it. But at the time, I felt really bad. I was like, are you going to sue me? And she was like, no. And I was like, are you sure? So there's so many different reasons why. But like, it's not always that we're trampling over trauma, and there are conversations that sometimes when you read it, that conversation starts. Like, I read a book, and YD Lamar might be able to post what it was called. She sent it to me, All the Ugly Things or something like that. And it was so emotional, like such an emotional journey for me, that it was dark romance. And I didn't know. I thought it was like contemporary, you know, easy breezy, but I had some questions at the end of that book. Like, I had to sit people down and be like, what do you think? And I feel like those are the types of books I want to write. That's the type of author that I want to be. I want my readers to read it and be like, you know what? What do you think? Was he in the right? Was she in the right? Who's wrong? Like, who's to say, you know? And that's why I write villains, because I feel like we need to be over the top, because at the end of the day, this is a fantasy, but it's not really a fantasy, because nobody is writing this thinking, I can't wait for this to happen to me. No, it's a fantasy in that it is so far from reality. You know, it's something that we don't want to happen. It's almost a nightmare. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just feel like that's my stance on it.
Thank you, Selena. Already touched a little on some of the other questions that I've got lined up for today, such as this one. So, as a survivor of abuse, I find writing about my own trauma can be very therapeutic. I also like to show other victims that there can be a way out of the dark places in our minds. What inspires each of you to write about traumatic events in fiction? Don't all jump in at once.
I'll go first. I guess for me, it's really therapeutic with the writing, and even, you know, so I only have one dark romance story so far, but I have contemporary too. But even if you go in there, all the heroines have traumatic pasts that are, you know, reflective of either something I personally experienced or something that I know someone else experienced or something along those lines. And I feel like, you know, a lot of us like to take traumas from our past that either directly happened to us or happened to us by proxy, or somebody close that we know, something that was personal to us, and, you know, relive it. For me, like I said, it's very therapeutic. I didn't want to talk to people. I don't like talking to people, but putting something into a fictional character, controlling the situation, the narrative, and I personally find it extremely therapeutic versus, you know, other methods that I'm sure some people do, or just simply not talking about it. But I think also too, giving a platform for those conversations or thoughts, or like you said, Selena, like having these things come up in books and having conversations get started from them. It's a nice opportunity for people to, what do I like to call it? Like let me ask you a question about my friend scenario. So we're putting it into someone else. You're taking something and putting it onto someone else. So you can talk about this character that you developed, and you can talk about an external person versus yourself directly, which I kind of enjoy that element as well.
I think of the ending. So what I mean by that is that dark romance can end one of two ways: very darkly or very happily. And I feel like for me personally, I'm now a veteran spouse, but way back when I was a military spouse, so I've met a lot of people and I've heard a lot of stories. And some stories have shocked and appalled and scared me, and others I've just been searching for the reason why. And I actually, when I was going to college, I started going for psychology. And I thought it's because I wanted to help people. And I think in some way, shape, or form I did. But I really found my calling in authorhood. And I think like a few weeks ago, I was finishing a book up. And I said, I now realize why I went to school originally for psychology. And a friend of mine was like, why? And I was like, I think I wanted to get into a psychopath's head. And here we are writing about psychopaths, because no matter how sweet, how like gentle I think my main male character is, every single time I will find that review that says this guy was a psycho. I have no idea why I read this. I couldn't stop, but he was a psycho, and I want everybody to know this. And I'm just like, was he? And I look back and I was like, you know what? He really was. Wow. So it's just, I can't. When I feel like when people say like we can't stop writing it stems from that, where I tried to do something super sweet and it turned out really dark. The only time I have successfully today, I finished it right before this interview, our After the Rain anthology piece. After the Rain is charity. It is support of the Rain organization, which, since we brought up essay, is great. And I wrote a piece with Whitey Lamar, which she is very dark as well as me. We do very twisted, dark things, and we called it Love for Me. And I really said to her, I was like, I think we're going to have to stop it because I can't get it lighthearted. I felt like I was just putting in too much darkness. And she was like, no, it's going to be okay. You can do this. This is a challenge. If you can write your first book, my first book was very light. She was like, if you can do that, you can do this. And I was like, you're right. And we finished it today. And I was like, oh my gosh, we did it. And it's just a beautiful journey to be able to challenge yourself and do something different. And I feel like dark romance gives you that challenge, because it doesn't have to be sexual assault. It doesn't have to be abuse. Toxicity and darkness have a range, and depending on who you talk to, what their walk of life was from, that range is going to vary vastly. It could be from somebody stole my whole company based off of revenge, to one day I was walking down a dark alley and this is what happened to me. Those are two separate, different dark instances for two separate people that hit people differently depending on their walks of life.
Very provocative.
I'm sorry. I'm just over here inspiring people. I'll just sit in the corner. I'm good.
So, Joshua,
Hey.
want to talk about what inspired you to write about traumatic events?
The question sort of reminds me of something Selena said to the last question, actually, about how we can't really help but write from our own lived experience. And of course that takes in the trauma as well as the happy stuff. So you can't really get your characters to be too far away from your own lived experiences. Like by any objective measure of these sort of things, I've not really had a particularly traumatic experience for my own life. So there's only so much I can really sensitively write into my own characters, but I do know like things like personal victimization, depression, and things like the griefs of death and lost love and that sort of thing. And they're universal to write about, sort of regardless of the finer details. and there is a sort of a strength to writing them in a humorous way, I feel, because I can't really stop myself when I write about trauma from making dark jokes, essentially, about them. And I find a certain amount of therapy in that.
Yeah. What about you, Erin?
So, when we look at writing about trauma through dark romance, I think it can be very therapeutic. I think, personally, there's different stages of trauma, if you can call it that. I'd like to add on to what Selena said. It's not all trauma is the same, and there's different kinds of trauma, and different people experience that trauma in different ways. And in saying that, in my own life, like I feel like I've lived many lives because so much has happened within that time frame. And a lot of it has been traumatic, and it's been different levels of trauma. They haven't all been the same, but one betrayal is somehow no less traumatic than another because it's always so unexpected, which is what makes it some sort of betrayal, right? Whether it's somebody stealing your company or somebody assaulting you in an alley, it is a betrayal of some sense. So because they happen at different stages, and of course, in my life, that's happened at different stages of where I am as a human being, you basically, I've basically absorbed that in different ways, depending on where I am in that time of my life. And what I've really enjoyed about reflecting back on all of that stuff is that I've been able to portray different characters within those different phases of life, if that makes any sense. So maybe I steal one piece of my own personal trauma, and that goes into a specific character, and her name's Layla, and she's like very superficial because that's her defense mechanism, and you don't like her immediately. Or maybe I take another traumatic experience that I've had, and I funnel however I dealt with that trauma at the time into a different character. And so what I've enjoyed being able to do is basically compartmentalize the different traumas and how I reacted. And obviously there's discussions with other people as well, but within these different characters. And obviously then you have the creative side where you can go, oh, well, let's make the character go through this as well. And then you have the creative extension of going, oh, well, if I was still that version of myself in that period and this happened to me, how would I have reacted? So it's the same aspect as when a reader, I don't know if you guys get this a lot, but readers often say, well, which of your characters do you most identify with? And I always have to say, all of them. And they go, well, even the psychotic ones. And I'm like, yes, even the psychotic ones, because those thoughts come from me. However that rage or anger or whatever it comes from, it is somehow one of my responses, and that could have been a response to trauma that now I've positioned into like a psychopath. It's all part of me. There's all different aspects. So I can never just say, I really just identify with this girl because she's so lovely. I don't. And I think that's very difficult for other people to understand because we write a lot of darkness and ugly facets of a character, and people don't understand how you yourself can identify with that. But I think if you've lived through trauma and you're writing about these characters that are processing trauma in different ways, they are going to come across as unlikable characters in certain points. There are going to be things that you think your gut reaction is going to be like, they'd never do that. But the point is different characters react in different ways. And I think creatively, and again, this is just personal, just because I've been through so many different forms of trauma, I have to look at it as a positive because it's a great drawing experience where I can create all these different characters that I know would react in certain ways. And, it's been very therapeutic in that regard, but it also makes for very good storytelling. And as a result, I think it's because of my history and obviously my reading habits now, I find it difficult to connect to, I don't want to say contemporary characters because there are some contemporary novels that are just absolutely fantastic. But I find it difficult to truly connect with those kinds of characters often. So you'll find that I only really pick up a contemporary romance when I'm like writing a character that's experiencing that trauma, because I myself am reliving that all over again through the character, and sometimes I just need to not think about that, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about all the authors who take big breaks after their books. I've been on lives and I've said, like, after the Sicilian Bastard, I took a break, because I spiraled into a dark, depressive state. I didn't realize how deeply and how closely I was living in his head until we finished the book. And then I was like, after my editor was like, okay, edits are done, we're ready to roll out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel awful. Like, we all take breaks because it's so dark and it's so rough on us, it's hard.
Yep. I can definitely relate to that. The my work in progress that I'm just up to like the final chapter and epilogue in my first draft. I've dragged my feet with it for months now because it is such a raw process for me to go through writing some of these things, because it draws on a lot of different traumas from my past, and not only that, I'm putting myself in the shoes of other women who have gone through some of these traumas too. So it's breaking my heart every time I sit down and write this manuscript. But I think by the end of it, I'll need a break, but I'll also feel that I've written something that will definitely help other women, give them a sense that they can get through it.
And if you look at therapy, they make you, or not make you, but a lot of therapists actually, talk therapy will have you do a journal. And they will have you journal down like all your thoughts and feelings and stuff like that during that day. And that is essentially how dark romance gets started. Like I would love to see readers sit down and write something traumatic. They don't have to share it, but just for themselves so they can see the journey, because you will never understand a writer's journey until you have written something yourself. And once you do, you start to see what we all struggle with. I don't even have to ask half the authors, how's your, what's the word? I just blanked. It's that syndrome where imposter syndrome. There we go. How's your imposter syndrome? And we're just all like, our book sucks, throw it in the trash, we hate it. Like, and everybody's like, how could you say that? It's amazing. And, oh, they're just ego stroking. No, for real. Like, I threw Conversation away twice. I threw it away twice. The book that has made me the most sales in my author career, I threw it away twice. And I had my team of readers who were like, please don't. We can salvage this. It's going to be okay. And I was like, no, it's trash. I'm trash. I'm out. And they're like, we have to, it's fine. Just finish writing. Don't look at any of the comments. We've got this.
Yeah. I think I'm going to jump in there. Again, it comes to writing through trauma. I think the problem, in some ways it's a blessing, but I don't know if you guys experience this. Because you're writing through some of your own trauma, I am so unable, because once I'm in the project, I'm unable to step back and do other things. I'm so unable. So it literally absorbs everything for me, to the point that I'm a non-functioning human until the story is finished. Because I'm like living this trauma. I become like a frozen human all over again. I have to finish the story, however it's going to play out. And I mean, everyday life still needs to happen. I still need to be a parent. I still need to work. I still need to do other things. But I go through the motions, but I'm not actually present, which makes me feel terrible, because then I feel like, oh, geez, like I'm not even present for my kids. But I'm washing the dishes and all I'm thinking about is the story, and I'm doing this and all I'm thinking about is the story. So as a result, but I know that stems from our own trauma, because I've spoken to other authors who don't write these like heavy, dramatic novels that are like dark romance, and they just respond to me and they're like, I set aside 2 hours from this time to this time, and maybe I will write 3 times a week. And I look at them and I'm like, I wish I could do that. I'm just physically unable. So the
It all
best
depends on the author, though, too, because some of them, some authors are very fast. And although many people tell me I'm fast, I would like you to see my best friend Whitey Lamar, because I thought I was fast, and then I started seeing Yonda write live sprinting, and she is fast. I will look away for 2 seconds, she has a whole page, and I'm just like, how? And she's typing it. She's typing it. So it really depends on your journey, what you're doing in life, how you process.
So for me, what I have to do is when I'm writing through this trauma, I literally have to focus, and I just need to get the story done, because if I don't work through it within a short time span, it's more, I want to say, it has the possibility of being more self-destructive for me, because I'm in those feelings of reliving everything for too long, if that makes any sense. It no longer just feels like a project that I am doing and working through. I'm suddenly like stuck there. And so what ends up happening is I allow it to absorb me, but I can't be there for too long. So I write these like 90,000 word books in like 2 or 3 weeks, and people will go, my God, like, how did you do it? And I'm like, well, I didn't really have another choice, because once I started, I couldn't stay in that place. It would have been terrible if I stayed there. So I needed to get it done. And I think that just speaks to different processes of like trauma healing and obviously writing through trauma. But that's one of the side effects that I've found in obviously pulling from my own trauma and my own memories and everything else that's happened, is that when I start writing, if I don't push myself to finish, I get stuck in those feelings. And that in itself is, you don't want to be in that place. It takes you straight back to sort of where you were. You're reliving those emotions, those feelings. It can be disastrous. So I'm like, well, just keep writing. Doesn't matter. Just keep writing.
Yeah. And thank you, Maria, in the audience there. I just noticed the comment, reading is therapy too. So I definitely agree with that. I read a lot of dark romance, probably more so than writing it. I've written a little bit, or I've, added some dark elements to some of the contemporary stuff that I've written, or even my PNR. But
this is just as much why we do it as well, is to communicate with those people who have felt the same thing.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I don't know if I write to communicate with people who felt the same thing. I write, and this is personal, I write because to not write feels foreign. And the byproduct of that and working through my own trauma is that I'm then creating these stories and I'm communicating. But honestly, I think even if people weren't reading my stories, I would still write, because it's so intrinsic and so part of me that to not write just feels strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the surprising question of, well, how did you become an author? And I'm like, well, I've always written. And it seems like something we all say, right? However, a month ago, a high school friend of mine happened to be on Discord. I did not know she was on Discord. She reached out to me on Facebook to tell me and invite me to a Discord server. And I was like, I have arrived. And she's like, yeah, I went to high school with her. And I was like, holy shit, like, and she's like, you've been writing since we were small. And I was like, you're right. The people I went to high school would know how crazy I am. That's right. Like, and you guys are still here on my Facebook watching this journey. And they take it too. They're like, yep, that tracks. Like, no one was surprised. They were like, how did you tell your family? No one was surprised. It was like, yeah, you literally spent all your time in the bathroom reading a book. And I'm like, but that's what I did. My mom's like, you said you were cleaning. And I was like, it doesn't take 3 hours to clean a bathroom, Mom. But it did to finish this historic romance.
Yes.
What I think is really funny is, so I'm in the process of packing and moving right now, but in that process, I've come across a million old boxes of junk from when I was a kid. But there's about 2 or 3 boxes that are filled with nothing but notebooks, or even like I made my own book. So like, in school where you had to like publish and press your own book and stuff like that. And I was going through and even reading some of these stories, and it's just funny to think about. I don't think I can ever think of a time in my life where I wasn't writing. Like, it's been ever since I was 5 and probably younger, whenever I could start to form like I guess for a while, probably just stick figure people and hoped it all made sense. But even it's kind of funny when I was telling my family that I was writing, and I realized it now going through these old boxes. So my first book was a contemporary small town romance, and everyone says, I'm not surprised that you decided to write or publish a book. I was just really surprised that you did, this happy, fun small town book, because if you go back and look at everything I was writing, even as a 6-7-year-old kid, it was death, it was horror, it was something wrong, there was isolation, it was all very dark. Like even going back through, there wasn't a single happy thing I could find that I was writing. And even in school, I went to school for like screenplay writing. All my capstone projects were, like teenage angst, sex, drugs, and violence. It was really funny to kind of go through and look at all of that. But
if anybody in the audience was viewing for Erin, she did tell us before we went live that the kids were around, and she's been having to go back and forth with the kids and stuff. And I said I'd drop a #momlife if she had to dip out and come back. So if you see her coming in and out, it's because she's got the little ones around, and that's what she has to bounce out of. But one of my girlfriends has a notebook that I tossed around in high school, and she was like, yeah, when you're famous, I'm releasing this to the press. And I was like, that's okay, you have my permission, I will write it down and sign it so you can remember I said it, because I have a terrible memory. But in high school they would make fun of me because we had this notebook, me and my group of friends would pass it around, and I'd write, and then somebody else would write a chapter, and somebody else would write a chapter. But every time they got to my chapter, that's where the action would happen. So they were like, well, we thought that we were just going to go to school today, and Selena decided to push our character off a cliff, and now her leg is broken and bleeding out, and we don't know why. And then they would like come to math class and be like, why did you push her off a cliff? And I was like, I don't know, but she was getting on my nerves, so she had to go. And that was like high school. So now I'm like, people are like, how do you write things like this? I'm like, let's just say I've been broken a long time, and I'm probably going to stay that way. It's cool.
I think back to what I was writing in my teenage years, and while I did start working a little bit on some paranormal romance that never went anywhere, most of my writing was actually really angsty, depressing poetry. Like you look through my diaries that I had throughout my high school years, it's like, wow. Yeah, I was in.
About putting it out though, like because poems, like putting it in a like book of poetry.
I'm not sure that it's worth publishing some of that stuff. It's pretty immature, but yeah, it's just interesting to look back
funny,
at.
But just for fun. I feel like poetry in and of itself, I always push people who do poetry to publish, because I find that poetry is something that a lot of readers need, even if it's not to make money, but just to share it with somebody so that, one day somebody will come through and be like, I read your poem and it touched me. And I feel like you shouldn't hide that from the world. So I have a deep love for poetry and written words, like for music. So I'm always like trying to push people into producing it out there, because I feel like that's the type of lyricalness, readers need, especially young readers,
Yeah. I certainly wrote something inspired by the way I used to write poetry in my debut novel. So I Heart Mr. Collins is a book written in the perspective of a girl in her senior year of high school, and then she goes into uni. But while she's in high school, she writes a depressing love poem. It's basically a sonnet, something that she had to write for English, but she ends up putting it in her journal, because the idea of this novel is that each chapter starts with journal entries that she wrote, and then she's gone back and written her memoir based on these journal entries. So yeah, I had a bit of fun sort of going through that process of thinking about how I used to write rhyming verse and angsty poetry. So yeah, I'll certainly look at maybe going and finding those old poems. I could put them on my blog, I suppose. Yeah. All right, so how dark does it get? What are some of the nasty things that happen to our main characters?
There is no limit for me, unfortunately. I'm sorry to tell my readers, there is no limit. And every time I try to like pull myself back, worse things happen. So, like for example, I was like, I didn't want Luciano Picone to be so harsh, so I tried to like tone down his like psychoticness, his psychotic ways, and make him more loving. And he broke my heroine's jaw, and I was just like, well, that didn't work. So there's no limit. And I will probably say, and I say this with, my readers know I take their mental health in account when I'm writing my books, which is why all my triggers are on my website, because Amazon has a nasty habit of, giving us the big old slap in the face for having triggers, but you need those triggers with this type of stuff. So I direct people to my website. Not only that, I can get more overly descriptive, and be like, these are spoilers, but it doesn't matter because it's on my website. And if you don't want to see it, just don't go to my website. Don't go to that section, but you can see those triggers. You can see those spoilers and those instances that you need to know. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but
how dark does it get? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'll have no HEA at one point. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's not really what I'm gearing up to, because I got into this wanting to do romance, but sometimes the romance for me in my writing is not the focus. Sometimes not even the genre that is the focus. I'm really on relationships, but it may not be the relationship you thought it was going to be. For Cold Retribution, the biggest focus I had were these brothers, because they were so loud, and a lot of people will say, my female heroine is very weak and whatnot. It's really that she was a quiet character, and what I mean by that is authors have some type of conversation with their characters. Me, I like to sit down and actually talk to them and make them like sentient and like do a whole interview and get really extra about it. This is why I don't have friends. But other normal authors, I'm sure, just make like a character sheet and stuff, but they're still characters. And I don't know, I think I can get really, really dark if I wanted to, probably with a huge break, because I do take breaks between my works. But yeah, there's no limit right now. I try not to do things that I wouldn't want my child reading when he's older. That's basically about it. If I'm like, oh, I don't want my son to see this when he hits the age of 18 or whatever, then I'm like, maybe it might be a little off limits. But I also ask other people to like, hey, is this too much? And so far I've gotten one yes. One time I've gotten yes, it was too much. And other times it's like, we're going to take it and you do it. And you're probably going to do it all right. So we'll be okay with it. And I'm like, well, that's the best I can hope for.
I don't necessarily do the interviews out loud thing, but I do have the conversations going on in my head with my characters. Quite often they'll just talk to each other and I'm a spectator. So, yeah. They definitely come alive for me too. How dark does it get for you with your writing, Frankie?
It depends on the story, but I don't know. So far in my dark paranormal, especially book 2, I feel like it's gotten darker. The character, she goes through a lot more heartache and trauma come book 2. But then I have another work in progress where, so my Roses trilogy, a lot of the trauma and darkness is external to her relationship. So it's not necessarily the hero or heroes doing something to her. It's things around her. It's things outside of the relationship. So the relationship might have some darker elements, but it's not necessarily the case where the lover hasn't done anything to her. But I'm working on a captive romance, and so that one I'm very excited for. I'm not supposed to even release it until 2024, but I've already written the blurb and have all this stuff planned out, and it's a dark fairy tale retelling of Rapunzel. So I'm been like super excited about it. But that one gets a lot darker, and especially in the change of relationship. I mean, honestly, I'd say as long as I think my rule of thumb is I don't really think about like, is this too dark or is it too light? I just think, does this fit my characters? Does this fit the story I want to tell? I don't necessarily go in and say like, I want this to be the darkest, bloodiest story I can possibly come up with. I say, here's the story I want to tell, and then go from there. Like Rose, I just said, I want to tell a story about a girl who sold her soul to a demon and fell in love with them. And then the rest of the story developed from there. And it took whatever course it was going to take naturally, because I found if I tried to force anything, if I tried to push a narrative, I couldn't write. I would stall, I would stop, and my brain would go blank. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm not writing the right story anymore. I have to cut this entire aspect of it in order to move forward. And so that's how I kind of am with my stories. The only time I've cut back is in my contemporary. My first book, there was a jerk in there who was propositioning the characters, and in my very first draft, it went a lot more beyond some suggestive statements, and I was like, that probably doesn't fit into a small town contemporary romance, so I have to probably step this back 10
I recall the guy you're talking about too, and I'm wondering if that would go anywhere.
Yeah, no, that one had to be cut down, so that's the only time I think I've ever held back, and that was because I was writing in a book genre that shouldn't take that boundary, and that's where I like to write in dark, because I feel like in the dark aspect I don't hold anything back. If it fits, it fits, however dark it goes.
Yeah.
Maria, my first book was not dark. Behind Two Screens is super light. So she got shot. All right. I'm like, wait a minute. Over here trying to plug lighthearted reads, and like my readers are like, no.
But I guess when I think back to my first book, it's like I didn't really know what genre I was aiming for. I just wrote the story. And then I realized afterwards I should probably put a trigger warning on this anyway, even though I'm putting it as contemporary romance, because there is one incident, that happens in it where she is sexually assaulted. So, yeah, even though that's not a large part of the story, but somehow it just sort of snuck into the book anyway.
Frankie, I like how you said that you, at some points, you said you pull back a little bit, because like I feel like that's my whole publishing career, is me pulling back. And if anybody read the dedication in Cold Retribution, it's because I was finally like, that's it. I'm going indie, and I'm gonna just do whatever I want. And it felt so freeing to do that, to just be able to put whatever I want in. And it's like, it's almost like, damn the consequences. But at the same time, it's like, I know I'm going to have to go through these reviews at some point in time.
Honestly, the reason why I even went independent. So, as I mentioned before, I wanted to write screenplay. I wanted to write movies. That's really what I wanted to do. I have a hard drive full of about 15 movies I wrote. That was exactly what I wanted to do. But when I started looking into the world of having movies made and the reality of it, I'm like, if lucky, I would maybe sell a script to someone, they would produce it, and maybe 10% of the content I put in there, if it was ever made, would have ever reached it. And so then I was like, well, then I'm going to just start writing stories. And I just kept writing them for me. And then I saw how easy it was to independently publish, or easy is not the right word, but how accessible it was to go on and self-publish via Amazon. And I'm like, you know what? I'm reading all these books from these, self-published authors. I love that they can just put out their story. You either like it or you don't like it, but they're not writing to what their publisher wants. They're not writing to what the trend is. They're writing their story. Sometimes it follows the pre-programmed story arc. Sometimes it goes all over, but hey, it's what they want to do, and that's what made me happy with it. Like,
that's a good point to bring up too, that most dark romance is not traditionally published. I won't say it can't be, because I've seen some dark romance publishers up and coming. I see you guys. I see you making moves, and I love it. But yeah, for the most part, most of the things, if an author claims to be traditionally published in dark romance, I would be a little skeptical, because a lot of what we write is not acceptable to turn in. I was traditionally published, so like we have guidelines that we have to stick to, and I was the one who was always pushing back and trying to play outside of the guidelines. So I was like, yeah, you know, maybe it is time to try indie, just because of the guidelines, because I just couldn't stay within them. I tried, and then I would be arguing my manuscript, and it's like, that's not what I want to do. We don't want to sit and argue the whole time. Like, I don't want to have to debate. You know, it's easier.
You already argue with enough voices in your own head. You don't.
Shots fired, Frankie Page. But
hey, no, me too.
Right? But I wanted to see your like when you're coming up with your plot and your ideas, do you see them in scenes from a screenwriter point of view? Because I do, but like I've only found like a select few people see their books in screens, so I'm always disjointed, because it's like scene 1, scene 2. It's not really a chapter, and then I'm like, now I'm done. I'm not at all, but
no, I do that, and it's also another. I feel like an area that I'm still trying to improve on is, so in screenplay writing, it's about setting the scene and then dialogue. Because in a movie, unless there's a narrator, there is no internal thought. So if someone's feeling or thinking something, it has to either be thrown into a conversation or it has to be thrown in with body language.
Well, that's good too, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like with me writing, I end up having, I think, fairly dialogue heavy books, because I don't know, like I don't like writing a chapter of internal thought, because I'm like, it's just hard for me. You know, I like, you know, me personally is my own preference. I tend to get lost, even when I read a story like that. Like, I want some action in between, but there's only so many, you know, actions. Only so many times you write, well, I sighed, you know, in between all of it. So I do love so much that balance between, you know, dialogue and internal thought, to pull it more from the movie. Like one of my cousins, she reads my books and she knows that I write, or I used to write screenplays, and she's like, sometimes I still feel like you're writing a movie. You're not writing a book. Like, I don't write in the standard, this is what she's used to for reading a novel. She's still reading like an over descriptive screenplay, is how she's described it sometimes. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah. Joshua, how dark does it get in your writing?
I have to say, not too dark yet, really. What I'm writing right now is very thematically tethered to what you've written as well, because this is a collaboration with you that I've got. It's sort of, I suppose you could say there are 3 stages of darkness that are happening within dark matter that's being written right now, based around the character that I write, Malik, because he's sort of got a past of bullying and victimization. Right now, he's sort of acting that out. That's in the present day, and things are probably about to get worse in ways that I haven't written and am only just kind of starting to think about yet. But it's not unlike what Frankie said in response to this question. The darkness kind of has to fit the themes that you have to write to start with, and a lot of that is tied to what you're writing, of course, Lelia, because this is something I'm doing with you. Like if I ever get to the brain baby I've had in my head for ages that I may write one day myself, this is the God and Cancer book. You know, that will necessarily get quite dark because naturally, because of the themes that are in it. But as to, you know, nasty things happening to characters, it really hasn't gone beyond physical violence very much yet.
Yeah.
It's in the comments too.
Yeah, so we do have
But worse things are happening to your characters within the same work.
I certainly take it pretty dark with Danica in that. So for those of you who don't know, Joshua Wake and I are co-writing a serial fiction called The Dark Matter Between Our Hearts. We have published the first season on Amazon now, and the second season will be coming out on my blog and through my newsletter as of July. But the way that we co-write is that we go an episode each, alternating. So I write from Danica's perspective and Joshua writes from Malik's perspective. So the male voice that you're getting across is actually written by a male. So it's something that I really wanted to try, and also to give Joshua an opportunity to explore his writing style. So, yeah, I just noticed a question in the audience from Maria. Do you ever have reviews that made you think you have gone too far, or make you question yourself? So this will probably be more for Frankie and Selena here.
No. I've had reviews that make me go, why am I doing this? But I have authors who write, like, what was the last book I read? I've been reading some alien stuff, but the last contemporary I just read was Terms and Conditions, because it was blowing up on TikTok. And I was like, I'm going to read this book, thinking I'm just going to read it, and it's going to be nice, and then it's going to be over, right? Yeah, my 3 parts on TikTok will let you know how awesome that book was. And the first recording for my TikTok was 10% of the way in. I was like, she had me at Senegalese twists, and I am done. I'm like, you can take me any day. Like, just come pick me up. I don't even need to write anymore. I just want to live in her head. And that's usually a lot of people had asked, a lot of my readers had asked why I stopped doing reviews. I was like, I really need to feel something to leave a review. Not that I don't feel anything when I read, but I mean, like, I want to live within that author's soul. Like, I want to penetrate them so deeply. Actually, that's awful. I should say that. I just finished writing, guys. I'm sorry. I just want to, like, see how their mind works. It's just a beautiful place, and that happens in any subgenre because I read it all. I've read splatterpunk, I've read dark romance, I've read aliens, I've read post-apoc, there was a really good zombie one I read last month. I read contemporary, sports romance, sometimes YA. If it's spicy YA, I'll read it. And I'm actually trying to branch out of romance and read other subgenres, because at the end of the day, I'm always and will always be a reader first. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. No, I'm just kidding.
Same here. So a popular theme that has arisen in dark romance is dubious consent, or what we refer to in the biz as dubcon. What are your thoughts on this matter, and do you or would you include such content in your books?
I don't know. I guess I'll throw myself under the bus. So, I'm definitely part of a lot of dark romance reader books. So when I see the dubcon or non-con, I'm usually like, okay, I'm going to add this to my TBR. So obviously as a reader, I'm very much okay with it. And I guess as a writer, same. I mean, especially I've seen it done in different ways. I've seen it done in ways where it's truly just dubious consent, and then other ways where it's almost more set up like role playing, where it's consensual entirely, but it's set up in a way that's meant to be.
It's dubious in the moment, but the meta is consensual.
Yeah, in which, I mean, I think both is good. I think it all comes down to what you're comfortable with as a reader and a writer, but I'm all personally for it.
Yeah, I do write about it, but I have to do it in a way that kind of respects the perspective that I can actually truly write in, because they're fairly limited, actually. So I kind of have to know my own boundaries within that stuff. Within that, though, I wouldn't be prepared, I don't think, to put my own name to something that actively fetishized it, that I thought was in an unhealthy way.
Oh.
That's just me.
So I saw this question before the panel, and I was like, because as my readers know, I am the queen of dubious consent. And in fact, this year, as I said, I'd like to do challenges. This year was a non-con challenge because I decided to sign up for Used and Bound because it was forced breeding. But then in our contracts, it was non-con. And I was like, oh, I could do that. I could not do that. No matter how much I tried, my heroine was forever consenting. So I had to tag another author and say, please help. So she could actually teach me how to write non-con because I couldn't do it. It was hard. And not because of the non-con itself, but because in my mind, I'm writing romance and everyone is going to be wet. That's my mind, you know? But also I have skewed thoughts on this a little bit because in my worlds, I should say, I do mostly mafia. I do mostly stalkers. So for me, consent is already taken away because 9 times out of 10, you are going to get drugged, kidnapped, forced, blackmailed, you know what I mean? Right then and there, your consent is gone. So for the anthology itself, I want it to be very much like this fits in with everything with our requirements. But with that being said, I also signed up for After the Rain for the charity anthology because it is to support, and since I didn't know we could say rape on, so I didn't write down what it stands for, but I do know that it's, God darn it, I had it. It's against incest and sexual assault and in children, and the whole charity is donating everything to RAIN. And then not only that, but we got told that something awesome that has never happened in my author career is going to happen with this anthology. I don't want to announce because I feel like I think we have a definite yes, but I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to announce and say, but I was really excited about signing up for that because I feel like a lot of dark romance authors get a bad rap if they write dubious or non-consent, as if we're living within that pleasure and that's what we want. I will say from being in this industry, we're on our 2-year mark now. A lot of authors are into BDSM, as in they do it in their real lives. And consent is a huge portion of BDSM. Specifically speaking, my marriage, we do a lot of non-consensual consent. And that's because it's just something that we just straight into. We didn't mean to, it just kind of happened. And then I kind of went with that, and we practice it. So that is why I can write these things without, I wouldn't say without repercussions, because I do feel the things that some of my heroines feel. And I do like to open those conversations and dialogues for that. But we're not getting pleasure off of it per se. You know, our readers aren't looking for that. They're looking for these powerful, emotional journeys and hoping that as the author, we can give it to them. Because not every reader knows what it's like to be a survivor. Okay, I'll say that. Not every reader knows what it's like to have lived with some type of trauma, such as sexual assault. So they're learning from that. And as an author, you have, maybe it can be subtle, maybe it's right there on the page, but that's what I did with my anthology piece, was because we had to do hope. I really chose to, use a sexual assault survivor to show that I do know, I do understand. And I hope that I did it well. I hope that my other author friends did theirs well. And I think it's something to talk about in panels, and it's something to discuss. But I really do feel like we get a bad rep, and we shouldn't, because I don't think we're doing this to hurt survivors. Notice I say survivors, not victims. Okay, there are a lot of sexual assault survivors who read dark romance. There are a lot of sexual assault survivors who go to BDSM clubs, which do exist. For many readers who think that's something authors came up with, no, it does exist. They'll go to conventions and they'll learn how to deal with their trauma. In fact, there was a book that I read, in the beginning of my career. It was beautiful. A guy went away. He was in the service. Something happened to his girlfriend, and she didn't want to tell him about it, so she lied. But she went to a BDSM club and did non-consensual, consensual. They had a whole therapy section, and I thought that was just the most beautiful thing, to have a therapy section in which you can replay what happened to you and change your ending. And that was so powerful for me. It changed the book for me, because it wasn't just, my heroine had SA and she lied about her boyfriend and that's it. But the fact that she could go, and she did meet the guy she was dating, because they ended up breaking up, or I think they were married, divorcing, because of her lie. She did meet him. He was an owner in the club, and then he was like, I'm not going to let any man touch you. I'm going to be the one behind the mask. But it was so beautiful, and I love that story. And I feel like it's stories like those that create authors like me. So thank you.
It's a good point that you raise in regards to the bad rep that a lot of authors get over this. I remember a review that I read, a scathing review of a book that one of my favorite dark romance authors wrote. I don't know if any of you have heard of Rena Kent, but she's an amazing UK author. And the review that I read was basically attacking her for the way she characterized the assault survivors and basically painting them as victims. Yet the way I read it was that, they were still going through the victim stage. They hadn't yet come out on to the other side and been survivors. So, I just feel like some people
So you
don't.
thought that said more about what the reviewer was feeling rather than what the book actually had in its content.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is the way I read it. This was someone who was a survivor themselves, and they were attacking the behavior of these characters early in the novel. And talking about stereotyping, or not all assault survivors will become nymphomaniacs and so forth. And it's well, no, but there are some that will actually feel more sexualized because of what they've gone through. And as part of their process of healing, they're looking for outlets. So, I definitely appreciate the term survivor, but, we have gone through a bit as victims before we've got to the point of being survivors. And I think that's something worth keeping in mind when you're reading these stories as well.
I think you also have to keep in mind, I'm going to say this, and I stand by this, and I hope that when I'm 80 years old, I stand by the same thing. Go look at your next door neighbor. Are they exactly like you? Do they look like you? Do they walk like you? Do they talk like you? No. Okay, so that is the same thing as a survivor. Just like anybody else, you are going to have that person's life and how they would have reacted, right? But that's not necessarily how you would have reacted. For example, I will pull on the Sicilian princess or the Sicilian heir. I got so much hate for my Korean American character Yoonji because she knew 3 different types of martial arts, and the reviews were that if she knew so much martial arts, why didn't she fight back instead of getting kidnapped? And I said, you mean to tell me 4 men come at you with guns and you're still going to fight back? Because I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation, I wouldn't. They have guns. I have nothing on me for a weapon. And at the end of the day, that's 4 men and I'm still 1 woman. So I say it is a fantasy to believe that a typical person would react a certain way in a certain situation. And because you wouldn't react that way, that makes it wrong. And that's my thing. It's not, because everyone comes from different walks of lives and we need to broaden our horizons. So I had another author friend who wrote essay, got terrible, very bad reviews where she almost wanted to give up her career. And she said, I think I should pull the book. And I said, do not pull your book, write another one. And she was like, really? And I was like, yes. You don't like those reviews? Write another essay, character. I was like, there's nothing wrong with your character the way that you have her now. Create a new character. You don't have to do just one. You don't have, because you're only showing that snapshot of that particular character that was created. What about a different one from a different walk of life? That's how you get different reactions and seeing through someone else's eyes, doing it over and over again. You don't have to stop at one just because you did it once. Honestly, all of my heroines, except for my After the Rain piece, every one of them. And I had a publisher ask me, are all of your heroines going to be SA survivors? And I was like, I don't know, but probably, because I keep trying not to put it in and it appears.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that I know as a reader, especially when I read reviews, well, I try not to read too many reviews, but I've read them and it gets so frustrating when I see people say things that, I wouldn't do this. This isn't how I think. This doesn't seem practical to me. I'm like, okay, well, good for you, but what about someone else? Like this concept that we're all supposed to react the same way. A trauma happens, one person might drink themselves into a stupor, someone else might isolate themselves, someone might go out like the next day like nothing ever happened. I mean, everyone is so different, especially with essay. You have one person who becomes hyper anti-sexual, bundles up, avoids people, avoids situations, drinking, anything that could put them in a risk. And then you have other ones who dress more provocatively, purposely put themselves in provocative situations. I mean, or the psyche and the mind and life all together just creates different opportunities for how people respond to things. It's the mixture of conditioning and an environment. And I really hate to see when someone downs a character because they say that that's not how they would do it, or they don't believe that would happen. And like, well, are you that person? Do you come from that person's lifestyle and experience? It's all psychology. To me, when I read a book and I can't relate to a character, like I've read books where I'm like, oh my god, just stop being such a perpetuant child, like calm down. But then I'm like, that's the character though. Even though like me personally, I'm in my head saying I can't stand how this character is acting. When I read the book though and I'm judging it, I'm like, does this make logical sense for that character? Like, is this character inherently immature, so her actions make sense because that's her character? That's usually what I'm looking at.
I think it's
and so there's no reason to yell at the author for that.
Exactly. I never do.
Backlash of
if I'm yelling at the author, I'm like, well, they did their job right, because I don't like this type of personality and they portrayed it perfectly. So thumbs up, 5 stars for writing a really good character.
I think it has something to do with binge reading as well. And I've learned this because I am a speed reader. I'm a binge reader. I have told many people that, but this year I slowed down. 1, because I need to write. And 2, because I think that sometimes after I finish a book, I need time to think about it. There are my momentary reactions. And then there are times when, like I say, a book will live like rent-free in my mind. And that's because I've read it so fast, I'm now consuming other works, but that book's overpowering all those other works because I didn't actually sit down and give my mind time to rest. I was like, no, I got to read another book. And then I'm like, wow, these situations, wow, this was a really good book. Like, and I'm like, I should have given it time to ruminate. I feel like binge reading can sometimes, And if you're reading the same stuff all the time, seeing it over and over again, it almost trivializes it because, well, I see mafia men all the time killing people, so who cares that he killed that one person? But it's like that person was important, but you miss the importance because you see it all the time. So it's not, you're desensitized from dark romance. And I tell readers all the time to hop out, read something light, read some sports, read some contemporary, and, you know, come find me when I drop next. But you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait for that perfection because, one, as authors, we have to protect our own mental health, right? And then two, you want these perfect books very rapidly. It's not going to happen. If you look at indie, is not the same as traditional published, but if you look at traditional publishing, a lot of them take like a year to prep for a book. This sense of rapid releasing is nice when you have the books already written. That's why I only have 3 pre-orders up for this year, because Cold Retribution was finished towards the end of last year. I finished Cold Salvation in the beginning of this year, and I have not written Cold Absolution because I want to get through my edits for Cold Salvation, and then I want to write while I'm fresh off my edits. But it's probably been the longest I've taken between books, and that's because I feel like we all need that momentary breath where we just breathe, we do other things, we give ourselves time and our characters time away from us to come back and remember all the reasons we actually love them, you know?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm just going to be like, I hate them all and I don't want to look at them again because I'm a people person.
Well, that's what happened. So I decided originally this spring I was supposed to come out with the next book in my Dark Paranormal, but I decided to push it to the fall, and I'm working on 2 and 3 at the same time together, and then they'll come out close together because I'm writing them together. But there was some things that I just needed to stop and really think about in the direction I wanted to take the story, but also too, just imposter syndrome and probably a million other things that authors deal with every day. But also, I just as well as I write, I read the same. I have to be in the mood, and I just wasn't feeling the mood. I thought I could go dark to dark to dark and be okay, but I wasn't. I had my contemporary small town characters screaming at me since November, and I was like, okay, well, you know what? I've tried to push you guys off long enough. You're affecting how I'm writing this next book and making me not feel as confident in it. So I'm just going to focus on your guys' book for a while, get whatever, thing out of me, work out whatever this is, and then I can come back clearer headed. Like, that's, I think, one of the reasons why I write both is so I can kind of swing back and forth on the pendulum of, light to dark, because we do need that breakup. You can't, I know there's a book I read from an author that I loved that was probably one of the darkest I read, and it left off on like a happy for now. And I think that was about 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago it was published, but that book just took that author down such a dark journey that she hasn't put out the second one yet. Like, she's still working on it, but it was one of the most, out of all the books I've read so far, one of the most twisted, not just because of, I said it had a happy for now, so obviously there was some happiness in there, but that journey to get there was extremely brutal, and I could understand why that author needed a break.
Yeah.
I could imagine living with my head, and it was a very long book, so it wasn't, 60,000 words. It was probably in the 150s, so that was a very thick book to be 80% as dark as it was.
Yeah.
I think I'll need a bit of a break when I finish my work in progress. Oh, God. Yeah. The dark journey does take its toll. Yeah.
It does.
Sure.
It does.
This sort of touches on the question, what's your greatest challenge as a writer?
Writing. After it's said and done, that's the best part, because that's where the editing and the marketing and the rewriting and the cover stuff, that's where I feel like writing is the hardest part. I really do. Sitting down and actually getting out your work and making sure that it's at least readable enough to, you know, start the editing process or give yourself a break, getting all your thoughts and feelings down on paper it's hard. It's hard, especially if you have research on top of that. If you're researching different nationalities or different countries or stuff like that, I find myself researching all the time, and research can pull you out of a scene real quick. I hate when I'm like in the middle of a pivotal scene and I'm like, what was the word I used in this language? Crap. And then I have to go look, either looking through my manuscript, looking through my notes, or actually having to hunt down and find the translated. It can be a pain in the butt. And writing is probably the hardest part. Honestly, that's what I would say is writing.
Yeah, that is one part for me actually as well, the continuity within your own writing to make sure you're actually getting that right. I was going to say on that question, my biggest challenge is probably, as I've found, given that this is my debut work, this dark matter thing, more so than Lelia, with whom I'm co-writing this, we actually, as part of the process at the end of season 1 of our serial fiction, divvied up the multiple story threads that are going and sort of allocated who is in charge of what and who started what. And I'm kind of terrible for just scattering loose story threads around to begin with, like confetti, and not knowing what to do with them later, and actually try to tie them into something in the end. So that's something that makes is probably my biggest challenge later in a story, is just trying to do justice to everything I started instead of just forgetting about it and letting it go. And obviously all the thinking and research that it takes to do that. And when it gets convoluted enough, I'm a procrastinator as well, so that only compounds that problem.
Yeah, some of the downsides to pantstering through, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is the other thing. Like, our process is you write something, I write something in response, and at the beginning I was just sort of thinking, okay, well, I've done this now, that's yours to deal with, that's your challenge. But now we kind of have to be moving in lockstep a lot more.
For me, I would say, to echo Selena, it's the writing, but also I'm just my own worst enemy. I think everything I do is crap, and not in a, I say that and I ask someone to read it because I want them to stroke my ego. It's a genuine thought belief. Like I don't need a 1-star review to tell me and make me feel bad. You could literally go on a 1-star review and tell me this was the biggest, heaping pile of poop you've ever read, and I'm like, okay, well, I thought about 10 times things worse than you even did. So it makes it difficult because I end up making my own roadblocks. I overanalyze things. I over-question it. I get so, I don't know, like I think about things and I think about the fact that I could go 5 different directions with it, and then I analyze what would have been the right direction. If they do this is going to happen. Is this the right way? Is this a missed opportunity? So if you ask my editor when I'm sending her messages telling her everything I write is crap, she's like, of course, you're about 75% done with your book then, I guess. And then I, have to walk away, because if I eventually I have to just kind of accept that this is what I wrote and just let it be and know that it's, a good story. It's just, I think in my own mind, I'll never write anything that is good enough for myself, which makes it hard to write sometimes, because then you get negative in your head and then everything gets blocked out.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I think I recall a time when I jumped on to Messenger, messaged both Joshua, who's done a lot of editing for me, as well as my other main editor, Felix. It's like, I think all my work's crap, and I've got some bad feedback. Like, do you guys honestly think it's crap? Just like having meltdown moments on Facebook Messenger with these guys. sometimes that reassurance is really what you need to pick up the threads and get back into it. Yeah.
I think it helped at the time, but I think it also helps that you've probably grown since then to the point where you sort of understand that the feedback is only kind of in strength, it's only an echo of the self-doubt that you go through all the time. And I didn't even mention it, but I get it as well. That's another part of why I procrastinate, is I don't really think what I'm doing is good enough either. But you kind of just have to almost put that in a box and kind of put a lid on it and ignore it in order to proceed. And that's how I've dealt with it anyway.
Yeah, I think for me, what helps get past it is situations where someone who's not a friend, or someone I talk to on the regular, who tells me how much they like it. Like when you find that one person who's completely separated from you, who's like, oh my God, I absolutely loved what you just did. And they have no reason to tell you that. They're not your day talk to friend where you can justify that, oh, they're just being a good friend. They don't want to tell you it sucks. But you found that like one person who genuinely thought it was good, completely unmotivated. And they're like, okay, so if this one person said it was good, then probably these 10 other people I talk to every day, they're not lying to me. Because there's one person that I've never talked to before, they told me it was good.
There is the factor with reviews as well. Like you're probably going to get a mix anyway, and often it just speaks to the state of mind you're in, whether you choose to focus on the people who said it was good or the people who said it was bad at a given point in time.
I started out with two of my friends. One I met in California when we lived there on base, and I've known him about 7 years. And one I went to high school and middle school with, and I chose them as my betas in the beginning, and they still beta for me. But every single book after like the Sicilian Air, my one friend, he always was like, I was cheering for the ending, and I'm like, yes, that means it was good. And he was like, yeah. And then he was like, so I said, I can't wait to start book 2, especially for Cold Retribution. He was so loud about this. He was like, what do you mean book 2? And I was like, book 2 of the Cold series. And he's like, no, I thought they all died. And I was like, you were rooting for them all to die? And he's like, every single one of them. He was like, I was applauding this ending. I was like, yes. And I was just like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, girl, I don't know, but I was happy. And now you're saying there's going to be a book 2 with all this foolishness? Oh, Lord. And I'm just like, I'll remember to send you book 2. Like, thank you. But for imposter syndrome, recently, very recent, a friend of mine, we sat down and we were talking about our goals, and our goals aligned. So we've decided to do some co-writes together. And I'm like, well, if we're already going to do co-writes together, we should do like other things to get us more in a healthier mindset as authors. And so we started like an author boot camp, and we've been working out like every day. And so when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, who is the best author in the world? You are. Nora Roberts ain't got nothing on you. Stephen King will call you and put you in a movie. And that's like my daily affirmation. So like in my author chats, they're like, I read your book and I loved it. I was like, I know, it's because I'm great. And they're like, look at that ego. And I was like, my affirmations are working, you guys. But it's all from imposter syndrome. A lot of my like readers will be like, you're so like shy and stuff when I read and stuff, and because it's imposter syndrome, I think it's horrible. But then you'll catch me being like, yes, I'm the best. You called me. How may I help you? You know what I mean? Like, but it's a lie that I tell myself, because if you repeat something long enough, if you say something, if you hear it long enough, eventually you'll believe it. So I feel like a lot of authors need to get back into their mental health regimens, whatever that will be for you as a particular person. Not everybody loves working out. Some people read a good book and that's the way they escape mentally, but they haven't read in like 3 or 4 months. Once you realize what you're using to cope, you'll start to see that your mental health will deteriorate and get worse, or your imposter syndrome will deteriorate and get worse when you let that coping mechanism fall to the wayside. You know, so if you like cleaning and that's the way you cope, but your house is a wreck, that's why your imposter syndrome is so loud. Maybe get back to cleaning a little bit, take a break. You will still have your fans, you will still have your readers when you come back. And that is totally fine and valid and fair. And I think we should all give every author, regardless of what they write, that momentary time for themselves.
Sorry, I was just thinking about the times I get through whenever I have writer's block. For example, like the second book in my family series, I struggled so bad with that book. The only reason that I got it written, I was drunk about 30 or 3/4 of writing that book. So I'm just keeping this in mind. So when I'm sitting here drinking during the day or constantly saying, well, Selena told me. That's what it's going to be.
Hey, you talk to Whitey tomorrow if it's about drinking. Selena Michaels is all about the flowers, okay? Whitey Lamar's got drinking down. I always go, when she says something out of pocket, I'm like, oh, so you're drinking today. Okay, let me just take note.
Yeah, no, for me, it's like the drinking is like the one thing that removes that. That's not saying that's a good thing, but for me, that's that one thing that like turns off the part of my brain that's over analytical and over critical, and then allows me to calm down enough to just word vomit out an entire story, and then I can go back through with that over hyper analytical mindset later and review it.
I stole that from Stephen King. I'm pretty sure Stephen King was the one who said, write drunk, edit sober.
Oh, yeah. Well, then here we go. I'm doing it.
There you go. See, you're already doing the damn thing. You already got it down. The man, hey, he's sitting on the top of the charts. If he said it, it must be true.
Exactly. So Selena and Stephen King both told me it's okay to drink while I write.
Oh, we ain't shit. So, when you're sitting in AA, please don't drop my name.
I'm gonna start putting that in my book. Please note, Selena said it's okay that I drink while I write.
You know, Selena Michaels cannot say anything about that because the many times I have dropped, Whitey Lamar made me do this. Whitey Lamar did this. Like I had readers who were like, do you even write your own books? I was like, no, Whitey Lamar climbed in through my window, sat at my computer and wrote this. I had nothing to do with it, blame. And she's like, did you really just say that? I was like, I really, really, really did. And I was like, you will take responsibility for your actions. These readers want to know what you were thinking. Good luck.
All right. I'm just conscious of the time here. We are starting to run out.
I'm going to have to tap out soon because my device is actually about to die.
Okay, so I'll let you go first with this one then, Joshua.
Yep, should make it.
Yep. Would you like to plug one of your recent dark romance releases?
Oh, well, the plug, that's, the synergy for this is wonderful, of course, because I only have one work to plug, and it's the one I'm collaborating with you, so... But I'll just quickly read the blurb for it. A blurb that I kind of just wrote out. So, The Dark Matter Between Our Hearts is a dark romance of episodes alternating perspectives between the two romantic leads. A rich girl and a bad boy with a complicated past, a dangerous present, and a most uncertain future, set to a backdrop of sex, drugs, and violence in a small outback town.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Frankie.
And I'll just keep on until it dies.
So my current work in progress for Dark is the second book in my Rose Infernos trilogy, and so this is the continuation of where we left off from book one, going further into what happened after the cliffhanger in book one, introducing a little bit more of a character that was identified at the end of book one. Unfortunately, I really can't say much without completely spoiling book one and giving spoilers in book two, but it's the dark paranormal romance trilogy that has an element of angels, demons, some sociopaths. It's a fun journey.
Have you got the first book with you?
I do.
Do you want to show it?
This is book 1. And book 2, just because if you're sitting here watching this or you watch it later, I will say, I haven't officially announced it, but the second book is going to be called Desolation. So it gives you a theme on what book is going to happen in book 2. Just a little bit more.
You know, Rose kind of reminds me a little bit of Anyanka from Buffy.
I won't lie, there was a good level of inspiration there. Anyanka, out of the whole Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe, is my top favorite character. Just everything about her. So I can definitely say there was a good element of inspiration there for Rose.
Good to know. So yeah, if you love vengeance inspired characters, then do check out Rose's Inferno. All right, Selena.
So I'm giving away a copy of Cold Retribution, and you have your choice of this, or if you really want to be cool, everybody on my team and fans have this, which is an oopsie that Amazon printed, but I've been signing the front. I've actually been signing the front of both of them. I sign wherever you guys want me to sign. If you want me to sign on your boobs, I will too. It's cool. I'll take one for the team, you know. But I guess I could read the blurb. I know what it's about. I like my blurb really, really, really a lot. We changed it partway through. So my brother's getting engaged, and I couldn't give less of a shit until he shows up at our parents' home with a woman I've had in my arms before. It seems Luke forgot to tell her he had a twin. I'll be damned if I let him use my good name to net a catch like Hannah. My brother's as possessive as I am, and we butt heads over our little Hannah with deadly consequences. She's like a treasured toy held between two boys, pulled in neither direction at the same time, but I won't let go of what's mine. Luke doesn't deserve her, and I'll die before I let him break her. I know, right? I'm so good. Shout out to Remy for making this blurb as I, binged the whole plot to her. She's like, tell me about your book. And I was like, yeah. And I just sent her like 15 messages. I believe it's Remy Light Services as I used for my blurb. She's really, she's great. Like, I didn't think it was, she did the first original blurb and I said, we have to change it. And she's like, okay, no problems. And so I sent her the rest of the information. Then she did the blurb for book 2, and we're holding off on book 3 because I haven't written it yet. But gosh, she's amazing. It just sounded, I was like, this is exactly what I want to feel. Like, I'm just like, you see how he's going to break her? Oh, that's beautiful.
Definitely putting that one on my TBR now.
Triggers are on the website.
So, I thought I'd open up the forum for questions from the audience. So, those of you watching the live stream, have you got questions for any of the authors here? Just click back through comments thread and see if I missed any earlier. Selena Michaels, what was your first book?
Behind Two Screens.
And what was that about?
It was about a woman named Holly, which I actually have a fan named Holly, and when she became my fan, she's like, you have a book with my name in it? And I was like, yes. And she was like, well, now I need to read it. And I was like, okay. She is running from an abusive relationship. She is kind of a recluse, and she meets a man on an app, and she really likes him, but she doesn't realize she's already met him in real life. Now that I say this out loud. So apparently it wasn't as lighthearted as I thought. Okay, Maria, you might have been right. But yeah, it's more of a domestic violence survivor type thing, and yeah.
Cool. What's the darkest book you have read? So this can go to anyone here.
I think
I know
for
this
me,
is timing and all, but I'm definitely going to have to drop out now. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua.
See you guys.
See ya.
yeah.
I can't. Oh, there's so many.
I would still say that I think my top darkest read is going to be Tragic Beauty by Iris Ann Hunter. I know that in some respects that there's probably or definitely darker books out there, and it's all a perspective. But for me, that book sat with me the longest, where I think afterwards I ended up binge reading the entire backlist of Pippa Grant just to try and work that book out of my head. So I still say, and also because of all the things that made me thought and feel in relation to, now I'm really struggling with names, but the character who had her and kept her, like I thought I could hate him 100%, but there was actually a part of me that started to empathize with him. So it really made me start questioning my sanity towards the end. So I really hope that she will come out with the continuation or conclusion of that one day.
I have too many, and I'm trying to narrow them down for what's the darkest. I had to phone a friend. Because I read too much, and so the books are like forever filtering through my mind, and I cannot remember all of them, but I do remember some. The Red Market by A. Giannicato, I believe is the way you say her last name. That was really dark for me. I thought The Life of Anna was dark. Then I read that one. And then I would say the Inferno series, but they're more of a guilty pleasure for me. I think they'll be dark for some people because they don't always end, well, they don't end in happily ever afters, at least not for the heroines for the most part. But I love it. I love Psycho Family, so I'm just like, yes, here for it. Sure. And then I believe there was one by A.A. I don't know. It had like a number for a title, but it's really good. And that was all like based on sexual slavery. And that was just something I had like never read before. A.A. Dark and Whitlock. There we go. Thank you, Dana.
Speaking of sexual slavery, I reckon one of the darkest I've read would have to be The Tide Man by Tabitha McGowan. Have you read that one, Selena?
No, I'm laughing because Remy just joined the comments and said she loves putting my name in her mouth. We try to pay your services, girl. That's the girl who did my blurb. She did. She's done proofreading for me. She's done formatting for Whitey Lamar. She's got her hand in a couple of pies. But yeah, her red light services is great.
Nice plug, thank you. The Tide Man. Very dark book to do with sexual slavery. Probably partially inspired my novel Winter's Thrall that will be coming out in May this year, which I'll be throwing into the bundle in the giveaway, which we'll be doing shortly. So what other questions have we got? God, you guys are typing too fast for me. What makes a good anti-hero or anti-heroine?
For me, I like the concept of someone just so... I like that absolutely twisted, dark, anti-hero that would literally slaughter an entire village, but then for whatever reason never lay a hand. Like this total Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation where with her, he's something different, but there's this darkness. So like, for example, when she needs something or wants something, it's not traditional. Like he's not getting her flowers, but he's bringing her the heads of her enemies. Like I love all of that. Like, just, you shouldn't really like them and love them. You should probably be running very, very far away from them. But for some reason, you're like, please give me more.
I don't know, Frankie. If you gave me a head, I might call you back, I'm not a gentle lover, but I might call you back.
I get it though, like that difference between fantasy and reality, the sort of book boyfriends that you enjoy because they're bad and they're nasty. They're not the sort of guys that you want to actually date in reality. But yeah,
like, isn't there a meme that went around that was like, if the guy from 50 Shades of Grey lived in a trailer, he wouldn't be nearly as sexy as he seems. Like,
or like Hot Matters.
Yeah, right.
In swirly cursive and then written in blood. It is really perspective though. I mean, my husband and I were just talking about that with like love songs. You listen to one and it's coming to you from someone you're interested in. It's the most romantic, deep down thing, but then it's someone you're not interested in. It sounds like a stalker anthem. And you're like, please stay 50 feet away from me and don't
that
call
song,
me.
There is someone walking behind you.
Yeah.
Comes to mind every single time I write a stalker. It's like, there is someone walking behind you. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm going to have nightmares.
But
for me, it's mental health. Really. But I said this in interviews before, and I think that's the beauty of being indie published rather than traditionally. Traditional, I feel like they like to put labels on a lot of things, and I get it. You have to market to people, right? But indie gives you a little bit more freedom. I have stated in previous interviews that all of my characters have some form of mental illness. However, there is only one book in my backlist in which you can point out where it says this is the mental illness, because I have never ever wanted to put that in a book. There's a reason. One, mental illnesses vary between people all over, right? So if I portray signs for anxiety and I tell someone with depression about my signs for anxiety and they go, wow, I too have those things, I must have anxiety. But the thing of it is, a lot of these things overlap. So I never wanted to specify what my character had. And a lot of the times my characters do not tell me, because when you introduce yourself to someone, you say, hi, my name is. You don't follow that up with whatever disability, mental or physical, you have. I've never introduced myself as, hello, my name is Selena Michaels and I have autism. Like, I've never done that. So I don't feel the need to do that for my characters, and I feel like I don't need to do that for my readers. You draw your own conclusion. If he was psycho to you and sweet to another person, great. That's exactly how I wanted him to be. If he was, calm and, more domineering, that's how you portray him. Like, it's all about what that reader feels from the words that you put down. So as long as I'm invoking thoughts and feelings and conversations, I feel like I've done a job, like a well done job. Like, if you're talking about me, if you're thinking about it, even if you're like getting me back, why did you kill him? And I say he had to go. Well, I hate you. Okay, I'll see you with the next book, okay? You heal. You are allowed to feel that. This is a safe place, and you are allowed to hate me, and I love you for it. Thank you for telling me that you hate me, because I didn't even think that character was a big deal. I tell my readers all the time, when I first started out, I killed a character. And I didn't think that they were resonating with readers like it did. And now a year later, I still have readers who are like, how could you do that to me? And I'm like, do what to you? Are we talking about this book? And they're like, no, we're talking about a book on your backlist from years ago. I want to talk about it. How could you kill that person? I'm like, what person? No, that person. I was like, they were a side character. They weren't ever going to get a book? And I'm like, did you think they were going to get a book? Yeah. And I'm like, Selena Michaels has left the chat. Like, but no, it's serious. It gets hard. It's hard to hurt readers, but sometimes, like I said, we're all different, and you connecting to that character is wonderful and glorious and valid, but there is probably a reason they were a side character to begin with, because I didn't connect with them. The only characters I truly connect so deeply with are usually my main characters, because they are the mains. And my side characters, and you can feel that when you read mine, my side characters are there, they push the plot a little bit, they have their own things going on, but not so much, because it's not their story. And I have told several side characters, Luciano, to sit down and wait for your book after I have rescued them from dying, because Luciano Picone was supposed to die in the Sicilian's obsession. He was 100% a villain. He is always going to be a villain. And I was ready to get him off, but he was so loud in my head, telling me about, it was supposed to be a standalone. He wanted to tell me all about his friends and siblings and all that I had to extend it to a series, because there were so many characters.
Those cheeky characters and their loud voices. All right, I'm going to start putting together the wheel of names for our giveaway. So I just want to check who actually wants to win a bundle of paperbacks and ebooks from our lovely guest authors. If you haven't already joined the chat with recent comments, give me a thumbs up or a hello to let me know that you're there and you would love to win this prize. And whilst I'm compiling our list of names, I've got one last question here I'll put to Selena and Frankie. I think this is an awesome question. Now, where did it go? Oh, I've scrolled too far. Something along the lines of your search histories. Have your spouses or significant others ever looked at your search histories and panicked? And what are some of the interesting research topics that you've plugged into Google recently?
One, I'm lucky. My husband, I purposely picked him because he is completely technologically, like, none. Like, there's nothing. He can barely turn on the TV. Like, his technology doesn't work, so I never have to worry about him looking up anything in my search history ever. Granted, he knows half of what I do because I talk to him about it a lot. But as far as what I've looked up, I have to really hope that one day I don't get in trouble because, especially like with Rose being a medical examiner, I was looking up a lot of stuff about body decomposition, how to hide things, I was looking up a lot of murdery body decomposition and what would happen in certain circumstances. So yeah, there's a lot of, like, I think one was I looked up how long will it take you to die if your artery is cut right there. Like, how long would it take? Could it be seconds? Could it be minutes? Because I wanted it to be accurate. And fun answer, it varies. Depends on how hard your heart's beating is how hard your blood's pumping. So if your heart rate's really high up, then that blood's going to pump right out of the artery and you're going to die in seconds. But if you're calm and slowly heart, then you're going to bleed a lot slower and die slower. So very educational.
So this year is a lot different than last year. Last year I was, for the most part, for half of the year, I was a stay-at-home mom. And now I'm working full-time. And that's just authorhood. Authorhood doesn't pay all the time, so you sometimes have to get a day job. So my answer is twofold: home, work. Home is not so bad because I have my spouse, we would call in the romance industry, is a nerd. So he's like, what do you need to know? Who do you need to key? I got you. I'm like, babe, can you like hold this big bag up over your head? And he's disabled. He's a disabled vet, and he'll do it at the risk of his own, like, hurting himself to see if he can hold, like a grown man can hold up a huge body above their head while it's hanging. You need to know these things. My child now knows how to skin a deer, and through no fault of my own. I thought I was in my office and I was watching skinning videos on YouTube. And so now my child is very into hunting. He wants a bow and arrow, and he would like to skin deer like mommy's video. And when my husband, while he was still in the service, when he came home and I had to explain that, it sounded terribly awful. Like, just terrible. I was like, how do I explain to you the reason I was watching these videos is because I was skinning a man from head to toe. Yeah, that's going to be awkward. My coworkers, I've got twofold. And like I said, as I've gone on and written more books, it's gotten a lot easier to see, to help mentally for people. So there are times in my shop where I won't work on my novels, and that is because one of my coworkers has triggers. I asked them about it when I first started working because they seemed very uncomfortable whenever I was in the shop, and they opened up and told me some of their triggers, and I said, okay, I will be more mindful of that, because I do feel like you should never have to work in a place where you're being triggered constantly, or you should never have to be in a place where you're uncomfortable. So, but then I have other coworkers that are like, who are we killing today? Because I'm in a mood. And I'm like, oh, let me just skip to this scene because I wasn't planning on killing anybody. It was supposed to be sweet, soft, sensual romance, but I guess we could kill people. So, if anything, blame my coworkers. Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going with. Blame my coworkers. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Interesting when you're talking about the research coming out into family life. Sort of reminds me of when I was trying to work out how to choreograph a game of poker in one of my novels that'll be coming out later in the year. So I sat down with my husband and my son, who at the time was only 12, and set up a game of Texas Hold'em. And they had to like each play a couple of characters. So they were like playing two different hands at once. And I had a few hands, and we were actually sitting around the table working out how this game would go. And it was interesting because in the story, there's a couple of 12-year-old girls who are at the table. So it was like my son was able to take on the role of these 12-year-olds at the right age, having no idea what this game is or how it works, and sort of fit perfectly and gave me some inspiration for how I could incorporate that dialogue into my story. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I have to say for the viewers who are doing the giveaway, I showed both books because I'm giving you both books. If you don't want to keep both, they're both going to be signed. Tag a friend. Just give that book to your friend. But I wanted to give both because Joshua doesn't have a hardback. So since I have an oopsies and a regular, I'm going to sign both the same way, and then that way you do what you want with that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Selena. So Joshua's contribution to the prize pool will be an ebook copy of season 1 of Dark Matter Between Our Hearts, and we'll throw in a $5 Amazon gift card as well. And as I mentioned before, my upcoming release, Winter's Thrall, won't be coming out to the public until May 14th, but I'm going to throw in an early order of the paperback. So that should be ready by the end of March. So you'll be the very first person to get your hands on a paperback copy of this. So at the moment, I've got 4 names in the drawer. I've got Remy, I've got W.A. Marlowe, got Maria Blakemore, and Whitey Lamar. If I've missed anyone, speak up now, or you'll miss your chance to go in the prize draw.
I'm saying right now, Whitey Lamar, you're not getting books because I just sent you books.
Okay. All right. So this is the prize draw coming up now. I'm going to share my screen.
Are we feeling suspenseful? I feel like we're right on brand for this.
Ooh.
Can you guys see this?
Oh, yeah, I can see it. I mean,
Alright.
they can see it too.
The
Yep.
line is like 10 seconds behind, so I haven't seen it pop up there yet.
It's popped up for me. I have it pulled up on my phone with the sound off just so I can make sure we're seeing everything we're supposed to be.
Yeah, mine's still behind.
All right, here we go.
What do you want me to do to your face, Remy? Yay!
Congratulations, W.A. Marlowe. Can you please send me a DM? I will need your shipping details and an email address that's linked to your Amazon account for your gift card. Plus an email to send the ebook as well. So,
Oh, okay, it froze, is what W.A. Marlowe said, but I commented you won.
okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay. So, yeah, W.A. Marlowe, congratulations for winning the prize. Can you please send me a direct message, like just straight through to my author page that you're watching this on? That'll be fine. So I can get your shipping details and email to send your prize through, or prizes. All right, so thank you very much to our guest authors. Unfortunately, we lost Erin partway through, but thanks again to Erin for being able to join us for the bit of time she did at the start. If you haven't yet, can you please go and check out Erin, Selena, Frankie, and Joshua's work, and share the love amongst your reader friends. All right. Hope to see you guys again in future panels as well.
Thank
All right.
you.
So
Thank you for having us.
Hopefully I didn't make too much of an ass of myself, but
I totally made an ass of myself. I'm like, this is yet another interview that is going down in history. Don't do many.
All right. So if you want to stay on the line briefly, I'll end the broadcast and we can do a debrief if you want.
Sure.
All right. So thanks again to the audience for joining us.
Thanks,
and have
guys,
a
for
great day.
coming.
bye.
Bye.